Imagine, if you would, a world where I am God. Curry is mandatory on Mondays, orange juice replaces tea as the national staple drink, and Berserk gets a big budget true to form anime. In this world, I snatch the reins away from Game Freak, and I am in charge of directing the next Pokémon mainline iteration, and are given the task to make it good. Assuming I don't have to consign 5 Japanese men to early graves with short deadlines, this is the angle I would go for. I would theme the game around the dream every youth has of getting his own Pokémon and going on his own solo adventure with them. This adventure is unique to that person and you can tackle it however you want. There are 3 major areas that I would like to freshen up in Pokémon: the primary gameplay loop, the secondary gameplay loop, and the tertiary gameplay loop. For primary, we can focus on minute-to-minute gameplay. For the secondary loop, hour-to-hour gameplay, and for the tertiary, we can focus on the overall game structure and themes. A good example to explain this to someone who doesn't know what these could be would be Dark Souls. Primary gameplay loop is the one-on-one fighting combat, locking on, shielding, dodging, attacking. You can pretty much use this all the time, it's super polished, fun to play every time, and you're going to be doing it a lot throughout the game. The secondary loop is progressing through the game, getting new weapons, upgrading stats, health, unlocking new areas after defeating an area boss, things you would do on an hour-to-hour basis to upgrade your character, to make traversing the world much easier and the actual one-on-one combat, the primary gameplay loop, that much more satisfying. Finally, the tertiary gameplay loop is the main thrust of the game, completing the story, linking the fire, and mixed with the atmosphere, the music, the world design, and the character stories and themes. I want to rebuild Pokémon from the ground up to reflect the personal journey. My first improvement would be on the PP meter, in that I propose, instead of it being assigned to moves, it being a global pool of mana. Now, this may be a reduction to be similar to other RPG franchises, and ripe for abuse in that you can spam Hyper Beam to your heart's content, but it's not quite like that. In a standard Pokémon game, some moves become redundant as you progress. Like, why would you bother with Bubble if you have Bubble Beam, which is a stronger move in every way, except for the only drawback being that it has slightly less PP, so you can use it less often. I propose you can invest PP into powering up moves. Tackle at 1 PP becomes Quick Attack at 2 PP, Extreme Speed at 4 PP, and Volt Tackle or something else at max 8 PP. Perhaps it could be even powered up in different ways. Scratch can become Iron Claw, Poison Claw, Dragon Claw, changing the typing by adding PP. Or perhaps, even more interestingly, a dual type move. Slam becomes Seismic Toss at 4 PP or Acrobatics at 4 PP. A fighting and flying move respectively. But at 8 PP, it becomes Flying Press, a dual fighting and flying type move. Now these mechanics bring a lot more possibilities to how you would tackle any situation in Pokémon, and will also allow the fact that you have to tactically think about your pool of PP at any time. This isn't the only area that needs sprucing. With models and animations still looking cheap and lazy, held over from previous versions, unique animations for every character for certain moves receiving different types of damage, like Colosseum, would be a much needed refreshment. I know I'm going to get flack for this, but if we're keeping the fact that the national dex is gone, then really make those Pokémon that are there feel like living, breathing partners, living creatures that you can personally relate to on your team. More tactical fights and expressive Pokémon will lend itself to the feeling that you are in this Pokémon world, making decisions and getting by on your own wit. One thing that's always been prevalent in Pokémon is the difficulty. You could get through all of the games on autopilot from start to finish without really having to change up the strategy at all. This leads to boring battles, which unfortunately make up a big proportion of the game. The introduction of the EXP share is actually a fantastic idea. Originally you would equip it to a Pokemon that was too weak to fight the harder battles, and it would get a share of the experience to level it up quicker. Sharing the XP upon all of your Pokemon in more recent generations is a far better design choice. Anything that cuts away the grind and repetition out of any RPG is a good thing. It's a quality of life adjustment. However, this did mean that sometimes you would feel over-leveled for a lot of the game. There needs to be a consistent difficulty curve for sure, yet just making the numbers bigger isn't enough. I propose that enemy AI needs to be changed. The difficulty changes I suggest can also be switched off in the options for younger and more inexperienced players. such as to limit the recovery items you can use in one battle to only one revive or only 2 potions per battle for each player. I also proposed that the opponent could swap their Pokemon mid-battle just like you can. However, in doing this, they will have an icon to indicate that they will swap their Pokemon before it happens. Each player could also swap their Pokemon 3 times maximum per battle. Now, while this may seem like an annoying addition to the sum, it's certainly something you can switch off for a more casual experience, which is fine. More power to you. I just believe it will require more tactical thinking, more brain power, and more investment in how your team is set up to how you deal with the challenges. And personally, through that, you'll find more of a bond with your team as you'll be more invested in them. And this also will prepare players what actual competitive battles are like. Along with the additions of the PP pool and the ability to power up moves, this new tactical way of thinking about battles has become far more invested than just mashing the A button over and over again. The next update I would give would be how gyms and Elite Four battles are structured to really focus on different styles of play that your Pokemon teams can have. I want the status effects to really have some gameplay implication, i.e. being burned would still half your physical attack stat, but I would rework them. Using a physical move on a Pokemon with the burn status would trigger the damage effect, or it could make them more vulnerable to special attacks. Paralysis wouldn't just halve your speed and make it random so that you can't move, it would also mean that maybe water type moves would deal more damage. If you could apply this logic to other status effects, and then work them into how gym leaders primarily combo their moves, these could lead to interesting gameplay scenarios where you figure out the weaknesses and how to overcome them in normal battles for your benefit in future battles. Really try and make the battles themselves far more engaging and thoughtful so they end up being memorable. I remember fighting the Psychic Gym in Sapphire where the leaders would be at a double battle, which was completely different from previous battles. I also remember Whitney from Gold, who used a Miltank with Rollout. This move would crush your team usually, unless you use something like Sand Attack or Evasion increasing moves which would stop the Rollout damage chain. These battles all had a memorable hook and were burned into my mind. Don't limit these battles to one-on-one battles. Have triple battles where the natures or special abilities all had an effect that buffed each other's Pokemon, so you had to defeat a certain Pokemon first to weaken the rest. A gym that has a reverse battle with a Shedinja that had very low HP but high attack, so you have to figure out the type weaknesses properly with a new move system. This is a bugbear for me, but I don't like that gyms are type specific now, as they're usually very easily defeated with a certain Pokemon or a certain move. So make the gyms thematic, as in Pokemon that inflict poison, not just poison type, heavy Pokemon, or pre-evolution specific gym. Also, I would propose a gym battle, which is a battle type that hasn't been used yet, which I'm surprised at, in that it's a 6 versus 6 battle. Obviously it could be overwhelming, and judging by how well the Switch was handling Dynamaxing, I think 12 animated models on screen at once would be quite taxing for the system. So here's my workaround. Have Gen 3 sprites instead, for some style and to reduce the slowdown. Everyone can choose an attack and who to attack. There's no limit as to who gets hit on the field, but change how the multiple hit moves work so there's only 2 Pokemon it can hit. This is just a gimmick battle style that will be for certain areas of battles, but I can imagine it like a chaotic game of chess, and that would be incredibly interesting as a boss battle. Moving on to catching Pokemon. That was in a nearly good place with Let's Go. It was really sad to see that random encounters are back in Sword and Shield, even after Let's Go Pikachu got a lot of praise for putting Pokemon in the Overworld. Adding them to the Overworld just makes it feel alive, makes the world feel like a special and inhabited wild. I would revert it back to the way that Let's Go did it, with a sort of mini-game about throwing the ball. But I would add in special abilities that your party Pokemon have. Have your Pokemon got an ability with a move that causes sleep? You can trigger that mid-mini-game for an easier catch. It also means that some of the berry Pokemon smell good, so Pokemon will come closer, making it easier to catch. Just spruce up the way it did it. And it also means you can avoid Pokemon on the Overworld, which means you don't need to fiddle around with repels, cutting out some of the chaff. Here are just a couple of other ideas that I think would just improve the game in some ways, in that you add 6 moves instead of 4 if we're doing the PP pool style of combat. Make Z moves and Mega Evolutions available quite early, as they're quite cool anyway, so I don't think they need to be locked post game. Flying should be able to take you to not just towns, but most major parts in the game to reduce backtracking. You should add a button like Persona 5 where you can automatically use the best combos of moves and medicine to heal your party in one go. HP and PP gradually restore slowly as you walk, eliminating a lot of the need to backtrack to Poké Centres. I would use this as well in a gameplay challenge where you cannot heal or restore PP in any way in a certain area, so it becomes like a gauntlet of challenges where you can't heal and you just have to rely on your Pokemon. And for me personally, I would have a complete lack of cutscenes or big exposition dumps for the story. Instead, it's all gameplay focused. Something that's always bothered me in Pokemon is the fact that when you reach Victory Road, it asks you for all 8 gym badges. It then speaks to you like, oh wow, you finally got here with the gym badges. Whereas you need the last gym badge to give you the HM to access Victory Road anyway. So it kind of feels like a missed opportunity in that you don't ever come across Victory Road and realise this is where you need to come back to like show that you're progressing through the game. It then made me think about how generally linear the games are. There is one real route to go through the game. It doesn't feel like you've chosen your own path or your own adventure. It feels like, well, it's very linear, which isn't a bad thing. Linear gameplay means it's very well choreographed, very well structured and designed for a specific story or reason. But for my vision of the dream or your own solo adventure, the thing that I propose is open world design. Now, this may strike some as odd and very weird, but here's my idea. You start off in Beginner Town in a Pokemon school. This is an area where you can learn about all of the gameplay elements to Pokemon, like you would in any Pokemon school where it tells you about poison or paralysis or whatever, but you can skip it if you need to. You then, after you've received your first Pokemon, you make your way towards a giant open area in the centre of the map. You will find a podium there where you can place 8 gym badges immediately, and you are encouraged to return here whenever you have received a badge. There are 8 branching paths you can choose from to visit, that each hold a gym at the end and can be visited in any order. Pokemon of all type are available early on, including Dragon, Fairy, Electric, whatever you want. Once you beat a gym leader and you bring the gym badge back to the podium, you receive a passive upgrade, such as a HM, which you don't need to make your Pokemon learn. These can be used for future paths for secrets and hidden areas that reward exploration, even on paths that you've already visited. The levels scale in each of these paths once you beat a gym leader to keep the progression of difficulty fluid. Finally, once you bring back all of the badges to the podium, bang, out pops Victory Road and you're on to the Elite Four in the Sky City. I hate HMs, they're bad moves that just take up a slot in a Pokemon's move roster, which you don't really need. If you just make the move passive, like Strength, you can just passively do that as a character. Maybe you've got like a Machoke arm, or I don't know, however they're going to do it. This would make the world design more like a Metroidvania, where you can return to areas after you've received a passive upgrade to progress. It gets rid of the fact that you need to press A for a text box to say you can do something, you can just do it immediately. The overworld design is far more separated from the battle system, and is much more suited to puzzles and strange obstacles. So I would suggest the puzzles be souped up and made more than just move over and click on the thing, and then select the right option. I will bring you back to the Reggie puzzles from Sapphire, where you had to look on a strange code written on the wall, which is actually Braille, and then you look at the back of the game manual, and it has the Braille code, and then you make that connection, you go, oh, and then you translate the code by yourself, and then it gives you a strange sequence of moves to open the door to let you catch the legendary Pokemon. Absolutely amazing. I love that stuff. Have more in-depth stuff like that. Since this is an open world design, it means each of the 8 routes need to be at the same difficulty, as any one of them could be the first one, but make the puzzles and the optional areas scattered throughout the routes more taxing. Maybe even have a Dark Souls-esque level design of going through and creating shortcuts to the hub town and other areas for the speed of travel. More mysterious puzzles like that on the overworld, like ruins of castles and things, really add to the sort of feel that this is a world that was inhabited and you are discovering and figuring out how to do things yourself. Just let me have my own adventure where I can explore the setting and characters at my own pace. Show, don't tell. Have story elements throughout the game, of course. Have history that can be discovered if you want to learn about it. Games like Dark Souls and Doom have popularised the need that story is available if you want to look into it, but it doesn't get in the way of fun gameplay. If you just want to play the game, go for it. Start in the Pokemon School where you have all the tutorials as options. The main thrust being that you want to be the Pokemon Master, that's fine. That's all you need to start your adventure. Keep Team Rocket as villains. They steal Pokemon and they make a profit. Simple. They're bad guys. They do bad things in different towns that you can solve at your own initiative because you want to. Not because the story makes you. You want to. Team Rocket steal maybe your starter Pokemon and you have to fight and defeat your own Pokemon that you have trained to get it back. Or they steal your whole team and you have to make a makeshift team in a certain area to fight them back and retrieve them. Imaginative ways of making Team Rocket the bad guys through gameplay that you personally are invested in defeating. You can learn more about the history of the world by speaking to people or understanding contextual things in the overworld. Seeing ruins on the overworld map linked with why there are certain Pokemon in that area, or Pokedex entries on the Pokemon linking to it. It's, such brilliant potential. And just have the minimum time where the control is out of the player's hands at all times. This is a game that has to be tackled at your own pace, on your own route, with your own story. You would still have a rival, the evil team would still be Rocket, but you choose your own adventure. And finally, once you've completed the game, you have the competitive aspect to look forward to. This game would be designed to shift focus on preparing players to be able to play competitively online after they completed the game. So maybe get rid of grinding for EVs, IVs and natures. They made steps towards this with the last couple of games with super training so that EVs and IVs aren't as horrific to grind for, but it's very jarring in comparison to the rest of the gameplay. So maybe just have an indicator to single out certain Pokemon with certain natures and then be able to rejig stats very easily, so you don't have to invest too much time into making a perfect team. You don't have to grind 100 hours of hatching 1 million Dratini eggs for the perfect Dratini. Therefore, you're lowering the skill barrier to entry and getting more people into the competitive aspect of the game. Win-win. If they're going to keep the national dex out of the game and limit it to just a portion, then that makes balancing way easier, which means more interesting competitive environment where you don't have swathes of banned Pokemon. And maybe you can keep the stats consistent to each evolution of a Pokemon, as people like how Wartortle looks but not Blastoise, so they can play with their favourite Pokemon. Pokemon is getting stale, unfortunately. I think a lot of people have started to notice it since the National Dex was announced to be axed. People have seemed to be cottoning on to the lazy design of how Pokemon is made, considering it is the highest grossing media franchise of all time. Pokemon has a lot of potential as a series and could have some real amazing game ideas, as everyone wants Pokemon to be great. When Pokemon Go came out, people went out in swarms because they felt like they were going on their own adventure. They were walking around themselves, catching their own Pokemon. It made them feel like a kid again, like the dream they had. So, if you can make a game that even comes close to capturing the essence of that dream, honestly, you're onto a winning idea.